Hello everyone and welcome back to Crayon Code. Today we're going to build a nice little floating action button with social media icons. So let's get straight to work and write some markup, which is simply a menu tag, which we're going to directly give the open class because we want to start with the open menu. And missing you here. And yeah, let's put 5 links here, 4 action items and 1 trigger item. So let's first put the first action item, which is a font awesome icon. Yeah, let's use font awesome from the brands. Yeah, since we're going to put social media icons, let's use, for instance, Dribble, like that one actually. So yeah, let's make this one here actually a little bit wider. Good. Okay, now we are going to put this several times in here. 1, 2, 3, 4. As I said, yeah, besides Dribble, let's use Instagram, Twitter. I'm sure I'm having something. Instagram, yeah, of course, there. Twitter and the Facebook F. Good. Now, as I said, there is going to be a 5th item, which is not an action item anymore, but the trigger. And this one is going to be from the font awesome solid style and is simply a plus. Very good. Yeah, I think now we have everything in place for that. Good. Okay. Now let's head right over to the CSS code. Here I've simply prepared setting the font size on the HTML tag, which is the basic measure for all usages of the RAM unit. And here I'm having simply a basic reset and the configuration for the background color. So nothing that important here. So let's start with the styling of the menu tag itself, which has, let's first put a few variables. The size, this is the size which will be having each action item, so the diameter of each action item actually. And let's have a radius, this is the measure of how much each action item is pushed away from the trigger item. And yeah, let's put some padding which controls how much from the viewport margin the entire action menu is actually put away. And we are having, of course, a background color which is white being slightly faded down to 90%, and a foreground color which is a black being, let's say faded down to 70%. And now for each child of the menu, for each direct child, because that's what's this one here, so it only selects direct descendants of the menu tag. So let's put a few things there. Since we're having link text used, let's first get rid of the text decoration, which is going to be set to none because there still may be some underlining in some user agents. And yeah, let's already put a border radius because we want everything to be perfect circles. So that's why we're going to put border radius of 50%. Let's keep also track of the right order from outside to inside. Now for each action item, let's put first the width and the height. As I said, size is going to be used as the diameter of each action item. So that's why we're using it for width and height. And now to make it actually visible, now let's put the background color here from our BG color variable. And same goes for the foreground color. You can already see something there. And let's use the FG color here. And actually let's move this one here up to the top because actually every item needs to have the same background and foreground color. So why put it multiple times? Very good. And you may see that they are not perfect circles yet. We will fix that once we get to the positioning. And let's give it also a little bit of a background shadow or a box shadow. So it's not shifted away but blur it by 9 pixels. Let's not make it grow, and let's use a black being faded down to 60%. So yeah, you can see it has everything a little bit of a box border shadow. So very nice. Now let's take care of the positioning itself. So we're going to use the fixed position because we don't want the action menu to move once you're getting to scroll. And we want it to be put in the bottom right corner, which means that we're using the bottom property with the padding variable. And since the right corner, let's move it to the very right edge with the distance of padding. So yeah, very nicely aligned. Good. Now every menu item should be positioned absolutely. Or let's keep this for a little bit later, but let's also make this one a grid container. And you can see now finally the variables for the width and height take effect. And we want to have the content being centered. So yeah, it looks much better except for the trigger, but we will fix that now. So let's introduce a selector for the trigger. So let's make it actually a little bit bigger than the actual action items. So let's use 1.6 times the size variables and the same for the height, so that it's perfect circle. Yeah, much better. So it's a little bit bigger, but the plus is still a little bit small. So let's actually work up the font size to 2 rems. Yeah, looks much better. Now for the arrangement of each action item, let's use a transformation. And this one is getting a little bit tricky here because we want to arrange the 4 action items in a quarter circle around the trigger. So what we need is a translation and a rotation. And for this to work properly, we actually now needed activated that one line we commented out, position absolute now. And that's how we are also going to fix the trigger here, because we then need bottom 0 and right 0. So now we have the trigger fixed, and for each action item we're going to use something very similar, but this time it's not padding, but it's size. So yeah, a little bit less than the size actually. No, where we can use 0.8 times, or it's actually, let's try something else, 1.3. Oh no, I need something less actually. Let's try 0.5 or 0.75. No, yeah, this one I think works. So let's put it right there, and of course use the same for the bottom. So now we have it behind the trigger. It's not perfectly centered, but that's not necessary here. Okay, now let's work first with the translation, which means that we're going to shift it upwards by the radius, which we have been defining before. And I think it's actually, yeah, we need a calculation expression here because it's -1 times the radius. Yeah, much better. You can see now it's shifting upwards. And now I want to use a rotation to rotate it. So let's actually now put this one here as the following transformation, where we're going to say, yeah, let's use a variable called angle. And we haven't defined that yet, but it's actually quite simple because we're using an nth child selector where we say, okay, the angle on the first item is 0 degrees. Then the angle on the second item will be 30 degrees. No, not 20, 30. And now for the third and fourth, let's define it. Yeah, actually first here, this is going to be 90 degrees. This is the fourth one. And for the third one, it's going to be 60 degrees. And you can see that they actually messed up the order of the transformations, because you can see this as matrices, and the order of multiplication in matrices actually makes a difference. Very nice. Now we just used the wrong direction. So I'm just going also to use calculate -1 times angle. Yeah, and you can see that the icon is actually also rotated, which means that we will have to put a counter rotation after the translation, where we are going to put, yeah, let's now use directly angle, because that should actually fix it. Now every icon is straight again. And that's how the menu should look in open state. And now it actually gets a little more tricky, because I want to animate the menu when opening and closing. And for that one, we need to introduce another variable, because the translation then needs to change depending on the open and closed state. And for that, we need another variable, which we just multiply into it. And let's call it simply factor, which is by default 0. And if the menu is opened, if we put that one to 1, you can see that the icons shift outside to the again. So let's start with 0 and add a selector for the menu when it is open. And for each action item, then the factor becomes 1. And this gets smoothly transitionable once we actually set that the transform property is smoothly animatable in 250 milliseconds through the ease in, ease out easing function Because if we now change actually the factor here, here, down there. Here, if we change it into 0, you can see that everything smoothly fades down behind the trigger. So now let's actually add some JavaScript code which allows us to open and close it. So we are selecting the actual menu trigger. So let's call it trigger here, where we use document.querySelector. And let's add an event listener for the click event. And each time the event gets fired, this arrow function here is called. Another thing is we can either click the icon itself and we can click the trigger, but we don't care actually if the icon or the trigger is clicked. We only want to catch the event on the trigger. So we're using current target. So if I click the icon, the trigger is also clicked because the icon is contained in the trigger. So that's why we're using a current target. And from the current target, the parent element is the actual menu. And here we are toggling the class open on the class list. So, and this should actually already make it, yes, nicely open and close it. Very nice. Now let's make it actually a little bit more pretty by adding a transition delay, because we can just introduce a transition delay on each of those items. On the first one, just to be explicit, we are going to set a transition delay of 0 milliseconds. On the next one, we will have 50. On the third one, let's put 100. And on the last one, it's 150. And this should actually make it expand nicely. And you can see that it's actually quite ugly because the circles here are still visible, which is no trouble, because once the menu is open, we can change the opacity to 1 and have the opacity by default at 0. So now, and yeah, of course now, and I forgot to add the opacity also with 250 milliseconds to the list of transitionable properties. So let's put also here ease in, out, and this will now nicely expand the icons. Now let's add another nice detail for the trigger icon, because once we click the trigger, the plus will rotate by 45 degrees to make it actually a close icon. So where is our selector for the trigger? I think it's a little bit more down. Yeah, there it is. Now we reach into the trigger for the icon and make also the transform property transitionable. Ease in, out. And once the menu is open, the icon itself, not the trigger, but the icon itself is being rotated by, let's use minus 135 degrees. And this should actually make it, yeah, very nice here in the direction also how the action items flows out. The icon is rotating. So yeah, that looks actually quite nice. Now let's add a few final details. Let's define a highlight color on the menu itself. Here, HI color. So this is going to be CE2EFF. And once an action item is hovered, there. So menu, and then there's, if the action is hovered, let's change the color to, let's use the HI color. And let's also add a nice little modified box shadow. But this time, let's also add it to the trigger itself. So if we're using the trigger also in the selector, let's change the box shadow to not be shifted. And this time no blur, but let's grow it by 0.35 rems. And change it to a black, which is faded down to 20%. And of course, let's also add this property to the list of transitionable properties. So let's actually put the box shadow in here. 250 milliseconds, also ease in, out, such that it looks quite uniform. So let's give this actually a try. Yeah, works very nice. And I think we could also, let's fade the color. Would look much nicer. Also 250 milliseconds ease in, out would look, I guess, a lot nicer. Yeah, very cool. So, and let's do the same thing for the trigger. Let's take this with us. Here, yeah, we don't need to transform because it's not being transformed. Opacity is also not needed. So yeah, we only have the box shadow and the color. Yeah, and that's already it. I hope you enjoyed creating this nice little floating action button with me. Make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks for watching and see you next time.